Hello and welcome to a Saturday edition of the Managing Madrid Podcast. We are recording this right after Real Madrid beat Getafe 2-1 in the first game back at Santiago Bernabeu, the new Santiago Bernabeu, which looks like a spaceship now. And there's still a ton of work to do. There's still a lot of renovations left, a lot of things that need to be added. But it's nice to be back home and starting that journey back home with a W. Fourth win in 4 games. And there's a lot of pessimism around Real Madrid right now. You know, there's major injuries. There are a lot of people disappointed that we didn't sign a star striker. But yet, Real Madrid on the field are doing what they're supposed to do, game in, game out. They have tackled these 4 games with 4 victories. And of course, who else but Jude Bellingham stepping up again, the right place at the right time for already is it his 5th goal of the season? I gotta start counting now.
I've lost track. It's like what, 5 goals in 4 games, something like that.
Something like that. 5 goals in 4 games sounds right to me. Ancelotti said after the game that Bellingham could score 15 goals this season. Are you taking the over on that or the under?
I will take him at 15 goals. I think right now he's doing like I was checking before this game and he had scored like 4 goals out of like 1 XG. That rate is just not gonna hold. So he's just not gonna score at this rate. So let's just say that right now he's on a hot streak. I think realistically 15 at this point it would be 15 goals, which is a terrifying number for a midfielder.
So you're saying 15 dead even. That's what that's your compromise.
I'm going for 15. That I kind of agree with Carlo. Like I think 15 is a good target. Especially like given the hot streak he's in, yes.
There's two different forces at play here, pulling this discussion apart. One is that he is outperforming his XG, like you said, and you have to factor in that eventually there's going to be a cool down effect, right?
Yes.
Maybe the honeymoon phase ends and he's still brilliant, but maybe he's not scoring as much. Then there's the opposite force of this. It's like, well, hold on. He's playing more advanced than he's ever has in his career. He is being asked to basically play as a second striker. He has got a brilliant knack for being at the right place at the right time with his off-ball instincts, whether it's to pounce on a rebound or just latch onto a final ball, get his head on something. So I don't know. Like I'll hedge on the over. I'll go on the over.
Nice. It's not at this rate. It's not a bad bet given the hot streak he's in.
Yeah. So Bellingham scored the game-winning goal, but of course there's a lot in this game to talk about, and Bellingham was not the only player that stood up. So we should get to the whole holistic view of this game against a terrorist organization that is named Getafe Club de Football. Maybe they should change club to something else because I'm not sure that was football. But I guess we can start at the top. Obviously, there was a lot of theorizing of what Carlo will do. You and I spoke about it on the mailbag. A lot of discussion between 4-3-3, 4-4-2, the Christmas tree formation from the Milan coaching days. And obviously, a lot of this comes on the back of Vinicius Jr.'s injury. This is our first game without him, first full game without him this season. So we were trying to figure out what's going to happen. Turns out Modric starts, obviously takes the captain's armband with him due to longevity. And Kroos is on the bench. Fede Valverde is on the bench. Those are the two notable emissaries from the midfield. Did that surprise you, Jose?
That did surprise me because especially at least now when the team is still like I was expecting, of course, some rotation with Kroos and Modric once the team started playing twice a week. But I was thinking that, okay, as long as the team keeps playing once a week, the lineup is going to remain stable and the young player and the young midfielders are still going to have priority. I can see some of the reasoning. I mean, I can see how against, I think what today showed is that against a satanic deep block like this, Modric and Kroos still have a lot to offer in these instances. I think, and the beautiful thing about it is that now they come into these kinds of games well rested, and you can see the difference, because today I think we had some really nice Modric and Kroos performances, and the fact that they don't have to play each and every game is a factor there.
Yeah. First of all, right now we're at the 1 week pace, 1 game a week pace, so that helps. And it obviously helps that they haven't been starting every game. And I also think with the opponent we faced today, like when I was thinking about when I saw Carlo introduce Kroos at halftime, and then you had the situation where Kroos and Modric on the field, I thought to myself, well, Getafe are not going to test us much defensively. So in a game where you need a genius or two geniuses on the ball who can be incisive and create, and you can maybe get away with having too many Rudiger and Alaba in transition, doing the heavy work defending in transition, I think it'll be okay. And obviously it turned out to be more than okay, because Kroos had an incredible game off the bench. We'll get to that. So that was kind of the starting lineup things. I suppose I was surprised that Fede came in so late, but I also thought he looked good in his cameo.
It was a good cameo. It was a good It was a good cameo, I think. And we saw, like, not just, of course, like Fede's usual ball carrying and everything, and like being more aggressive going into the box than say Modric. But you even saw like some neat passes here and there. Sometimes we forget that Fede actually has a passing game to him.
Yeah. So let's go through that wild first half. The whole game was pretty wild. I mean, as far as the low scoring games go, like, you know, it was 1-0 at halftime, 1-0 for a while, and then 1-1 and then 2-1. I mean, to me, it flew by. Like, I don't know where the time went.
Yeah.
Because it was nonstop. Something was happening. And it was just an incredible game in terms of, I will say this about I have nothing good to say about Getafe. I just want to say that like when you play against them, I know it's not football, but viewers also can't take their eyes. Like the same thing happened against Barcelona, even though it was a 0-0. Everyone was glued to the TV because it was just so wild and chaotic to watch Getafe just kick the shit out of Barca. And then, you know, even today, like it was brutal to watch, but it was also like highly eventful.
Yes, and sometimes like I can't even call it like Bordalas ball, because whatever they do, it's not with the ball. Like you can't even call it that. And today, like the first half, for example, they were quiet compared to, say, the Barcelona game in the first half, because like you only got like 4 minutes of added time. Like in the Barcelona game, they got like 10 minutes of added time just in the first half.
Yeah. Look, thankfully, La Liga has actually been pretty entertaining so far. There's been a lot of goals, and that surprised me. So the rest of La Liga right now is making up for the terrorist organization that is Getafe. So when you watch that first half, Jose, can you diagnose the difficulty that Real Madrid were having against Getafe? Like what was it that Getafe were doing, apart from the obvious kicking the shit out of us, but also you can talk about tactics, you can talk about their antics, their dark arts, whatever you want.
Yeah, I'll go a bit into the tactics, because in this case, so their main block. So you see that they start the game with like you see the original lineup. They start with a bunch of center backs, and you're wondering, okay, what kind of Satanism is going to happen now? And I was wondering how that was going to be laid out on the pitch. And then I see the actual line, lineup. The game starts, and it was incredible, because it's the first time in my life I've seen a double pivot with two center backs, because Omar Alderete and Engine Dakonam were in the double pivot there, which I like. That's the one that blew my mind, because I'd never seen a double pivot like this. So like I was losing my mind most of the first half just with that, because it just shows that like this team was not really thinking about what do you want to do with the ball? It's really thinking about what to do against the ball. The guy that's normally in the double pivot, Maximovic, he was actually more on the left. So it was almost like covering, trying to cover Real Madrid's right side. I think they were also expecting kind of Carvajal and Fede on that side. So probably they were expecting like a bit more aggressiveness there in terms of movement. And what's interesting about that 4-4-2 is that it shifts a lot. Getafe shifted a lot between a back four and a back five, depending on the situation. Because, of course, once you have that 4-4-2, sometimes then Real Madrid starts committing more players forward. And then say they have to deal with like this line of like 5 Real Madrid attackers. Because in the end, you have like, say Jude, Joselu, Rodrygo, like those are kind of the front 3 in a way, and then you have the fullbacks bombing up and down. So you often have to deal with like at least the line of 5, and in those situations, then you got, for example, Alderete. He started taking like a step back and shifting into the defensive line, and then it becomes more of a 5-3-2. So situationally, that 4-4-2 became like a 5-3-2, depending on how deep Getafe had to defend. And that's how they all. And how does this? How did this affect Real Madrid? Well, part of the problem is that the only actual box play, like box presence that the team had, was Joselu. For the rest of the time, like, yes, Rodrygo can sometimes get into the box, but a lot of the time he's outside the box trying to create something. The same thing with Bellingham. So the only consistent box presence was Joselu, and a lot of the time he had to deal with 4 to 5 Getafe players in the box. And that was the main issue that I saw throughout the first half, which is that the team could get to a certain point, and they could even combine to the point where they got into the final third. But then once the team got into the final third, the whole create something, send it into the box, and try to get a shot out of it. It never happened, either because Getafe had enough men to prevent that pass into the box, or if there was a pass into the box, Joselu was outnumbered there. So sometimes, of course, Bellingham or Rodrygo or even the fullbacks, even Carvajal and Fran Garcia, would make the run into the box. But in general, Real Madrid was outnumbered in the box, and it was really hard to get shots off in that environment. And that's why I think a lot of what the team did not translate into shots.
This is a very unique, strange, and funky version of Real Madrid that we're not used to seeing. I mean,
yes,
I talked about it on the podcast with Sid last night, where just bring up the fact that this is the first time we don't have a star striker in some 40 years. And Arantxa Rodriguez had tweeted that this is the first time in Real Madrid history that Real Madrid don't have a number 9. Like the number 9 is not assigned to somebody. It's never happened before in club history. And then you have a situation as well with Vinicius' injury, which makes this circumstance extremely unique because we really don't have much width in attack. So all of our width is coming from the fullbacks. And it was kind of weird to see the team navigate that. And obviously because of Getafe low blocks, and I mean, you go through different phases of this game. They were just deep banks, blocks and banks of 6 and 5 and every single person behind the ball. And you know, obviously the worst thing you can do against a team like that, who is also extremely, has an extreme identity of riling opponents up, getting in their heads, stopping play as much as possible, being very physical. The worst case scenario against a team like that is to go down a goal early. And then, of course, I thought that the ref also allowed them to play a certain way without punishing much. So we go down a goal early, and it makes it a little bit difficult. And obviously Ancelotti assesses it and then takes Fran Garcia out. That surprised me a little bit. We should talk about that in a second.
Me too. Yeah.
But ultimately it all worked out. So with the mistake, I mean, he obviously made a clear mistake. Fran Garcia, I think he puts Alaba under a little bit too much pressure with that back pass to him. Rudiger does his best to save the play, but he just gets a little bit unlucky. He sprints back and the ball kind of just goes through him and into the net. Of course, it's Borja Mayoral who scores. By the way, Mayoral and Latasa, seeing those two lead the line of this Getafe, and Latasa especially joining in and being brainwashed of this is how you play. Like, he was throwing body checks around. A little piece of me inside died. On that sequence, Jose, what went wrong? Could you pinpoint it apart from Fran Garcia making a mistake? Also, was Kepa a little bit too aggressive coming off his line in that situation? What do you think?
I mean, once you're in that position, that's one of the, once the keeper is in that position, I think you have to be a really great keeper to hold that one. And I mean, I like Kepa, but he's not at that level. Like, it's just one of those where, like, you look at it, it's like, it's Courtois. Okay, he can probably save that because he's a fire-breathing dragon. But for Kepa, I think that situation, I don't know if I'm a bit conflicted on that because I normally like my keepers to be a bit more on the aggressive side. Was it a bit too aggressive? I don't know if it would have been much better if he had stayed on his line, if I think about it. Like, it's just gives the striker like a larger angle to decide to choose his shot. And I do think maybe the execution was not flawless, but I think the decision to go forward and try to reduce the striker's angle is still the right decision from Kepa. Then as far as the pass, yeah, it is a bit of a complex situation, because I feel like it's just one of those where, like, 8 out of 10 times Fran can make that pass, Alaba controls it, and then you get out of it as if nothing happened. But this is the one time where it just wasn't going to be the case. And it is true that maybe Fran is not the footballer you expect to have like 100%, like big precision in these kinds of first touch under pressure situations. The only thing I'd like to say is that, I mean, Getafe is the one that forced those passes and that switch of play. Then Fran, so that's part of their own pressing work. Fran was probably a bit ambitious trying to get that switch of play back to Alaba on the first touch, and then Alaba can't manage to control it, and then the ball gets stolen. So it's just one of those sequences where, to me, the credit still goes mostly to Getafe in that that's kind of their whole, that's kind of their whole shtick. They want to force those mistakes when you're building up, and that's what ended up happening. And kind of the painful thing is that it's really just that one mistake, and that's the goal. So,
and then by halftime, Getafe had us exactly where they wanted us. But of course, our remontada DNA would not allow it. What did you think of Fran Garcia's performance overall? Because it reminded me a little bit of the first game against Athletic, in the sense that I think nerves were a factor, but I think he did good things as well. Ancelotti said after the game that his, taking Fran Garcia off at halftime he does not view Fran Garcia any differently or value him any differently. He did mention that perhaps the atmosphere of the Bernabeu, factored in some of the nerves. Against Athletic, he was making his Real Madrid debut this season, and against Getafe today, he was making his debut at Bernabeu. So nerves could have been a factor there. But I also think, despite some of that shakiness, and it wasn't just that pass to Alaba, there were a couple other things too. There were just one or two more passes where it just looked a little bit too jittery for him. There was one moment in the 37th minute where he could have just kept shielding the ball and let the ball run out of bounds, but instead he forced a clearance and it goes right to a Getafe player. There was a couple moments like that where it looked to me like a little bit shaky. Like you didn't really see that stuff from Fran Garcia with Rayo so much last season. I think the few games in between, he's been better in that sense. But he also is the one who sets up Joselu for that golden chance in the 6-yard box, if you remember.
Yeah.
In the first half. And that came off a really brilliant run because he cuts inside and then cuts back outside, gets to the left half space, and then sets it up brilliantly for Joselu. You could argue that should have been an assist.
Yeah.
So I don't think like he was bad enough to take off. But having said that, why don't we get to the switch? I mean, so Alaba or Nacho comes in. My first thought was, sorry, I'm going ahead of myself here. What were your thoughts on Fran Garcia's performance?
I think it was a good example of his pros and cons because, of course, Fran Garcia is not like a footballer of like tremendous technical security under pressure. Like it is, yeah, like he's not that kind of footballer. He's not like Alaba, for example, that like if Alaba had to receive like that, had to pick up that second ball that happened during the goal, he would have probably passed with the right strength. He does like Fran will have more of those mistakes in him because he doesn't have that level of technical security under pressure. So that has always been clear with Fran. But what does he give you? A lot of intensity, and that's current. And I think that goes really well with the current game plan, with like the intense midfield diamond, with all the back and forth. It is true that just sometimes when you have a football, like in many ways, it reminds me because like somebody was asking me about Reguilon this week since he's moving to Manchester United, and there are certain things where he does remind me. Like sometimes Reguilon had these situations where he looked like really rushed in everything he did. And sometimes Fran does give me that feeling like he's rushing without a need to rush. And that can lead to more mistakes, especially in possession, than what you'd like. So that's kind of the issue. But on the other side, then you get a lot of intensity, and right now, a lot of intensity is what this team needs to support kind of the diamond, the 4 midfielder setup. And I think I was kind of against subbing him out because part of what I was telling you before, like I thought the team did not have enough players going into the box, and actually the fullbacks were rather active going into the box, and Fran has that energy to get into the box more than Alaba did. So what was Ancelotti's logic with this change? Alaba gives you a bit more of that technical security under pressure. So mistakes like the ones that happened in the first half were not going to happen. And he also gave you, and Alaba still has a bit like a better pass and control in tight spaces, which might work better off Rodrygo. I think that was kind of the logic in subbing him in. What you lose out is, yes, you lose box presence because Alaba wasn't going to make the runs into the box that Fran could make. So and I think at that point in the game, I felt like Real Madrid needed that box presence from the fullbacks more than it needed kind of the technical security and the combo play. So that's why I didn't quite agree with the move. And I do think that later in the game, the team got more of that box presence, say, with Fede's substitution.
Well, it's interesting you make the point about the difference between Alaba and Fran Garcia attacking the box. I mean, there was one sequence where Bellingham's on the right. He shakes his defender with a really nice shoulder drop, gets past him and puts in this cross. And it's Fran Garcia who is on the end of it.
Yes.
And Fran Garcia is attacking the ball in the box. And I think it's great that he's doing that. I also don't I obviously would rather that to be Joselu, for example, because I don't, Fran Garcia can't really do with anything with that cross because of his player profile. And I think honestly, the primary difference to me between Fran Garcia and David Alaba at the left back position is that I don't know what the word is, composure maybe. Like Fran Garcia is a highly chaotic player, and that can bring a lot of good stuff, but it also has some negative stuff that comes with it. The negative stuff is that, can sometimes he needs to just relax and slow the game down and, make sure he makes the right decision on the ball, maybe not leaves too much space behind, maybe be a little bit better on the ball when it comes to being pressured and giveaways. At the same time, it also brings it's constantly dragging players around, the defenders around, creating space for others. He's always in attack mode, right? And so maybe Carlo just wanted something a little bit more channeled and composed and experienced in that situation. So Alaba is just a different profile to have. I think it's good though. I mean, because Alaba's been vocal, like he doesn't want to play left back. He wants to play center back. And him being vocal about that is why when I saw the sub initially, I was like, I don't know how Nacho helps us break lines more than Fran Garcia does in this scenario when we need to break that low block. Of course, it was Alaba. So I am glad that it was Alaba who went to the left back position. I thought it's, having Nacho on the field in these moments is great anytime. Like having these captain-like figures in to keep our heads against Getafe is always welcome. Vazquez is another one who I actually thought had a good game too. But yeah, so that's the sub. There's probably more from the first half that we haven't explored yet. Was there anything else in the first half that you saw?
Anything else from the first half? In general, the shot production was not ideal. And the main issue, I would say, is the plan from this team, like in the last few games, has really been like being so intense. Well, you have this mix of very intense, but also highly technical players in midfield, and the forward line. And what you want is to really beat opponents really in terms of 1-versus-1, either physically, either technically, or on the dribble. That's really what you want to do. The whole point of Getafe is that, again, Bordalas does whatever brainwashing and Satanism is necessary to get these guys to be so convinced going into these, to get these guys all mentalized, to really win those 1-versus-1 duels. These guys are really hard to beat 1-versus-1. And you could see that here. It's just Bellingham, Rodrygo, they couldn't get away as often as they could in maybe other games or against other opposition. And it is against this kind of opponent where not having Vinicius really hurts you, because he's in the end your biggest one-on-one attacker. So that was also part of the issue that I saw during the first half, is you didn't have, there was not enough players were not particularly inspired on the one-on-one in order to get past Getafe players, and the best one-on-one threat is injured. So that also affected the strategy in the second half. Kind of changed, because instead of saying we're going to beat this guy's one-on-one, then you bring in Kroos, you have Kroos, Modric, Alaba at the fullback, and then the strategy is a bit more we're going to try to beat this guys by moving the ball really quickly, instead of trying to just beat them one-on-one. And that's really the big change during the second half, which is introduced by bringing in Kroos.
Yeah. It's interesting because you mentioned just some of the differences in the first half and second half, in that and the shot volume and the ability to create chances. That did improve in the second half a little bit, and Carlos spoke about it a little bit. I think it was, in terms of breaking a low block, I don't have huge complaints about the way we play. No matter how great of a team you are offensively, it's always going to be a challenge to play a team like this. There's only so much you can do. Creating chaos is honestly some of the best things you can do. Runs into the half space, unpredictable, fluid football, players dragging players away, crosses, counter pressing are great because you can pounce on loose balls and rebounds. You look at the 2 goals we scored, that was the case. The shot volume was also solid. I mean, let me do so I can share my screen here. I think this is interesting. I'll just share my screen here. If you're on YouTube, you can follow along. And if you're listening at home without video, I'll just narrate it so you can know what I'm talking about. So this is a lot of shots in the box, right? So we generate 2.65 XG from that. On Managing Madrid, Sam wrote that Joselu and Rodrygo themselves combined for 1.4 something XG. Obviously, Joselu's big chance here in the 39th minute was a huge part of that. But look at the high volume of shots. And Rodrygo, I believe, had 9 shots, if I'm getting that right.
Was it? Oh my God.
9 shots, which went under the radar, which I think I bring this up because I actually want to talk about Rodrygo, who got a lot of criticism for his performance tonight. Just want to double check this. Yeah, 9 shots, and one of them was on target. So I think with him in games like this, you need players like him. 9 shots, only 1 on target, and I think people will criticize that. Like I've seen people push back against me on this a few times where I've said like shot volume is so important. You need players who can generate shots. And they're like, why? Like, oh, because games like this. Look today. Bellingham scored the game winner from a rebound from a Vazquez shot. You need players who can just generate a high volume of shots. So Rodrygo's, and I thought he improved as the second half wore on. One of his chances was a brutal shot where Joselu does a really good job to lay the ball off to him, and Rodrygo just botches the chance and volleys it into the crowd. But I liked his intent in this game. I thought that improved in the second half. In the first half, he was a little bit too quiet for me. I don't know if it was because maybe he was too central. He needed to go out left more to get the ball and go where he's comfortable to find more space. But in the second half, I thought he did a really good job. And, I'm sure that a lot of these shots are Rodrygo, right? So Rodrygo right there, Rodrygo right there, and Rodrygo right there, Rodrygo right there. This is like a lot of this is Rodrygo. And I think his intent was important. I wanted to get your theory on this. I'm not sure if I really like the way Carlo handled the penalty stuff in the last game. And I don't know if I'm reading too much into it, but Rodrygo misses the penalty. Carlo gets angry. Everyone's seen that scene. Carlo later explains that he wanted Modric to take the penalty. The message did not get to the players in time for whatever reason. Then in yesterday's pregame presser, Carlo says our 3 penalty shooters are Joselu, Modric, and Vinicius. And he kind of excludes Rodrygo. And I'm thinking, like, what did Vinicius do to be in that short list that Rodrygo can't be when it comes to penalties specifically? And I just don't know like how much that all the penalty stuff hurt his confidence overall. Obviously, that was his first penalty he also took since the miss in the World Cup, that penalty miss. Am I reading too much into that, do you think?
Not necessarily, because when I heard also the shooter list, I also didn't understand why Vinicius would be there instead of Rodrygo. So I don't know if and of course, that's the bit of information that we don't know. Like, was this really planned from the beginning, or is it some kind of punishment that now he says, okay, now the order is this and excludes Rodrygo from it? I don't know. If it was really kind of a punishment, is that like, okay, we're going to put Vinicius now on penalties instead of Rodrygo because of what happened last time, then I definitely wouldn't agree with that handling of the situation. If it's something that was already planned from before, then I'll just say, okay, Carlo and the coaching staff might have their reasons.
And how about just Rodrygo's performance overall?
This might be the analytics take from me, but I can't blame a player who gets a lot of shots in. Like, the player is doing what they're supposed to do. I know there's a lot but like, they have to finish, and that's true. But if you don't get shots off, you don't get finishes. So you have to begin somewhere. you had like at this point for this game, Joselu got 5 shots, Rodrygo got 9, both of your strikers got 14 shots total.
Yeah.
It's against a team that's a nightmare who are a nightmare when it comes to attacking against them. Of course, you'd like the shots to have been from better positions and everything, but I think both Joselu and Rodrygo had a good performance. It's reasonable to a degree to hold the missed chances against them, but a striker's duty before finishing is first to get the shots off. If they don't get the shots off, we can't even talk about the finishing. So they did what they're supposed to. If they keep putting out good shot numbers, the goals will come. So there will be some frustrating games like these where they can't get the goals in, but if they keep shooting like this, the goals will come.
Yeah, I also don't think it was possible for those shots to have come like from
better
better
positions.
positions.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
you
agree.
can't. They can be maybe like against another team in another game state, you can have maybe more open shots. But against this team with the amount of bodies they had in the box, I think it was pretty impossible to do. Like again, we created 3 big chances, and the rest were just high volume of us trying our best to just chip away at the wall and try to chip away and break it, and we just couldn't. Going back to the first half, we didn't talk about the 3 penalty shots, 3 penalty shouts, all on Bellingham. The first one, which was called, the VAR reviewed, canceled it. There was 2 more. I actually think the 2 that they didn't initially call were actually the penalty shouts, and I understand why the first one was canceled. Did you have any view on those?
So, yeah, the first one that was canceled, it's something that if it had happened, I would have said it's like, okay, this is kind of a light penalty, but it's not the end of the world, not the end of the world to call it. But yeah, I mean, I think let's just say that out of those 3, there should have been at least one. There should have been at least one in my view. Like at least one of these should have been one. Of course, every ref does it differently. Like it's really funny because I wrote an article for Fútbol España a couple of weeks ago where I said, okay, just like if you want less time wasting in the league, you need the refs to let play go on more. And it's like, and now it's like, am I going to complain now about the ref that let play go on? Damn it. Yeah. But it is definitely a game where you kind of wish that certain things had been called more than they were. But
I know it's a dilemma because Lewandowski was talking about it the other day, where he's saying that in La Liga there's just the refs stop the game too much. They disrupt the game too much. Last year we saw that the amount of red cards and yellow cards in La Liga was crazy compared to the other leagues. And then you have the opposite problem where I feel like when in games like this, where you let things go against a team like Getafe, they feel like empowered and emboldened, like, oh, okay, we can be a little bit extra and get away with it today. And that's the message. And there were plenty of times with Vinicius in particular where I felt like La Liga didn't protect him as one of the household stars in the league. Like there was just a different rule with him. Like you can kick this guy 5 times, he can kick you once and he gets the yellow card. And I think I think you got to use your common sense. Like the other one irked me was that Camavinga had a completely clean challenge in the first half and he got called for a foul. And this is the classic Camavinga problem. He wins balls that look so impossible to win that the refs just can't conceive that it's a clean challenge. So they call it like, no one's legs can reach that. Like,
yeah,
there needs to be a specific scouting report for Camavinga for referees. They each get a sheet of paper before the game with Camavinga's report. It's like, this guy is he has the leg of a king cobra. His leg just turns into a giant anaconda, and he wraps around and he wins the ball cleanly, do not call. Do not card. If you see a challenge, make sure you better be damn sure. I feel like Camavinga is the victim of many bad calls because he wins balls that are inconceivable for him to win. But anyway, I'm just kind of nitpicking.
Yeah,
I don't like talking about the referee, but
then with Getafe, and like the things that Getafe turns this into an art form. Like it was similar, like with Barcelona, that I don't remember how it was, but it's like I think at some point like in the game, like Barcelona had either more fouls or more yellow cards than Getafe, and you're just wondering like, how are we in this universe? Like how are we in this universe? And they've turned this into an art form, and it was the same at some point here in this game. I think the first half ended up, if I recall correctly, with more fouls from Real Madrid than from them, and it's
yeah, that's crazy. So we got some of the referee complaints out of the way. Second half, the equalizer, Joselu, happy for him, man, because
yes,
he's kind of turned into extremely unfairly. He's been the one a lot of fans are yelling at. None of this is his fault. He's a good striker in La Liga. He scored 16 goals last year. It's the third most of anyone in the league. He is a solid backup and a sporadic starter. He is not a Real Madrid starting quality striker that we're used to. Again, I don't think our starting striker has ever been a Joselu type player in at least 4 years. But it's not his fault. And he worked really hard. He was one of the people really fighting in the second half. And you even think back to the Celta game, Jose. His ability to fight for a header at the far post that then leads to the corner, that then leads to the Bellingham goal in the Celta game. And then today he's fighting in the box. He's trying to get on the end of rebounds. He's trying to keep the ball alive. Like, remember that sequence in the second half where they were basically just heading the ball back and forth in Getafe's box, and like he was trying to keep it alive, and he gets the rebound, he gets a shot off. So I'm happy for him. I'm happy he got his goal.
Yeah,
so
and every set piece, he's usually the big threat because he's one of the most aerially dominant guys there. Like he was a threat. I was somewhat disappointed by I was a bit disappointed in the Celta game. Today I really have I don't really have much to criticize here with Joselu, other than, of course, you'd like him to finish, for example, to get that really big chance in the first half. But other than that, I for what I expect of Joselu, I really, this is about as good as of a performance as we can get from him. And he was active. He was always a threat in the box, either in set pieces. He was always there challenging for the headers. He got 5 shots off. Again, it's just hard to ask more of him.
Yeah, I thought it was great. And also, it's just so nice to have the fans back behind that goal too, without the banner. And I think that's underrated. That's an underrated signing. The fans back behind the net. We need those guys because every time we scored last year and the year before, we were celebrating with a banner. Like the fans today, really hyped it up back there. I wasn't there, obviously. Ewan McTeer was there tonight for Managing Madrid, and he's the one transcribing the press conference quotes, Carlo, and soaking in the atmosphere. He was blown away. He thought it was incredible. Like he said, the roof adds a different kind of atmosphere to it as well, and the place looks amazing. He was really impressed. So it's good to be home. Toni Kroos, in his one half of football, 7 key passes, 7 of 9 long balls completed, 1 incredible left-footed shot off the post that I didn't even think he was going to be able to get to, a couple incredible passes into the box. Just his vision, his execution, everything. And we kind of mentioned earlier why he makes sense in a game like this. What an asset and just what an just an incredible player and just an amazing performance tonight off the bench.
Yeah, so one thing that I had some concerns about, like going into this season, is that I always bought like the concept of bringing in Modric in second halves as an impact sub. I bought that a lot less in the case of Kroos, because he's kind of like, because rather than him being the player who breaks games or who breaks games in second halves, you imagine him as this guy who gives you control and stability during games. So like he doesn't exactly scream like impact sub to me. And then we see a performance like today where he was most definitely the impact sub. It's gonna give vibes of like that 2014-2015 season of Barcelona when Xavi was the one making substitute appearances. And yes, sometimes what he gave, more than breaking a game, what he was doing is actually give you more control and stability. But sometimes then he could have situations where his passing could unlock a game. And this is what we're seeing also with Kroos in these situations where, and again, like I have to emphasize the fact that you can get Kroos and Modric well rested into these games is a big factor, because it's just a different energy. Like there are just certain things when if they're playing every week or twice a week, I felt an energy in Kroos and Modric's game that I didn't see last season when they had to play every game. So I think this is very positive. They are coming in with a different kind of energy, and it sets them up very well to be like kind of substitutions that can really, really impact games during second halves. And then the other thing I'd comment is what I said before, where Kroos is basically the big change of strategy in the second half, because that's really when the team decides, okay, instead of trying to beat this guy's 1-versus-1, which is kind of the strategy that the team had been using in previous games, like break opponents 1-on-1 because our players are so good. This time around for the second half, the strategy was more, let's try to move the ball very quickly to try to destabilize their structure and try to create spaces. And what better person to do that than Toni Kroos?
I mean, the other midfield sub too, Fede Valverde was awesome off the bench. And, the first, like within moments of coming in, his first contribution is his bread and butter run into the right half space.
Yep.
That causes so many problems for the defense. And you got it's hilarious because we mentioned Kroos coming off the bench and the ability to rest him and Modric and play them less, but when we play them, they look so fresh. It's not just them either. The fact that we can bring Fede Valverde off the bench today, no matter, if you're the opponent, last game, I think it was Kroos and Modric both came off the bench. Today, it's Fede and Kroos. Another day, it might be Camavinga and Fede or Camavinga and Kroos. No matter what combination of players comes in off the bench, if you're an opponent, you're like, oh man, that's their fresh legs, as though those two midfielders are coming in. And I know we're stacked in midfield and thin in other positions, but I guess just focusing on the positive, the positive part of our depth chart. The midfield engine it's nice to have the depth there. It's really nice.
Well, and it's important because in the end, that's the one area where the team is stacked. So that's where the impact substitutions are going to come in from.
Yeah.
Throughout most of this season.
When Bellingham scores, it definitely may have screamed a little bit.
I think my neighbor, I hope my neighbors think I'm okay.
By now, they gotta know, Jose watches football, and sometimes he just makes crazy noises.
These are new neighbors, so they'll have to get used to it.
So I'm just gonna share my screen with this one too. I like to do this because when I immediately after Real Madrid play, I like to go on Managing Madrid because I always learn something new. And everyone should do the same thing too. So look, like we already have 4 post-game pieces up. Also, a huge tactical article that I wrote is here, 9 tactical observations on Real Madrid. Those articles it takes me like a week to write, and there's a lot of film in there and data. So please go and read that so that I don't write it for nobody. So 3 stats from Real Madrid 2-1 Getafe by Sam Leverage. This is the one that caught my eye. Bellingham becomes the 14th player to score in his first 4 La Liga games. In doing so, he became the 14th man to do so in La Liga and only the second in Real Madrid history alongside Cristiano Ronaldo. The only other non-forward to do so was Cesc Fabregas at Barcelona. So I'm curious to know if he scores next game, what the stat will be from Sam, because the stat keeps getting narrow and narrower. Like he kind of like started this at the beginning of the season after each game, and now the stat kind of changes every time because the short list of players who have done this on their debut season will just keep getting smaller. So talk to me about Bellingham's performance. You can talk about I'll just add my bit before I pass it on to you. He has the ability to have quiet games and still be just ice cold mentally in a moment to score. It's the same trait so many superstars have had in the past. And I also thought like he was relatively quiet, but he was doing so much as well. In the first half, he was doing a lot of good work on the right wing. I thought his understanding with Modric was very good, and they had a bit of interchangeability going on with them, especially in the first half. His ingenuity in tight spaces. I mean, you even saw it on the penalty which got overturned. Just his quick thinking, like to get around 2-3 players, his touches. There's a different level to him that he makes things look effortless. And some of it is subtle. And of course, the goal itself is not a spectacular goal. It's not a golazo, but it's understanding of where to be, pouncing on a loose ball. You know, a lot of people would complain. These people are, probably not someone I should be referencing, but a lot of people would complain when Cristiano Ronaldo scored quote unquote easy goals. And the answer was always like, look, if it was so easy, everyone would be doing it. He understands the game at a different level. He moves off the ball at a different level. And I think Bellingham has just this natural instinct of knowing where to be. I don't know what the season would look like without him, quite frankly. But yeah, go ahead. Your thoughts on Bellingham.
Yeah, I think it's one of those performances where, again, like Bellingham has shown even in previous games, like against Athletic, by his one-on-one domination of other teams and of other players. And again, this was an opponent that was really hard to beat 1-versus-1. And you could see that, I think, again, in this game, just Bellingham and Rodrygo just had fewer successful dribbles than usual. It was just hard for them to get past their man. But even then, you see a lot of resources, like the changes of direction, the shoulder drops, the feints, like even those little things that don't count as dribbles. And Bellingham still uses them to try to generate chances or shots or passes. Just all, like you said, like all of those little details in tight spaces are so valuable. So maybe this game didn't aside from the goal, didn't look like this huge statistical showing of Jude Bellingham, but so much of what he does unlocks spaces for the rest of the team. A lot of like these days, what the team does is like you try to get the ball to say to Jude in zone 14, and then because the team at this point already, like you already know that you can get him the ball in front of the box and he can probably make something happen. There's always going to be something. He's always going to try to do a feint or a dribble or something to try and then try to send and then try to thread a pass through the defensive line for one of the fullbacks. Like, when he gets that ball in zone 14, that something is going to happen. He's at that point right now. And at this point, it's a player who is completely fundamental to how this team breaks down opponents. He's becoming very quickly very necessary for these kinds of situations. And the nice thing is that he just shows up everywhere, like you mentioned. Like today, like I was trying to look at the pass at the heat maps. I haven't looked at all of them yet, but I got a feeling that today he was operating, like you said, maybe a bit more on the right compared to other games. Part of it might also be like, especially when Vinicius plays, like we're very left-sided, maybe this time around. And with Modric on the right, there was a bit more play and possession, and the ball was going around a bit more on the right side. So this time we saw him a bit more on the right side. But yeah, that's the beautiful thing. He's always going to do whatever the play and the team requires of him. I mean, at this point, the main concern for example, the main concern I had today with Bellingham had less to do with him and more to do with the fact that sometimes it feels like the team needs him in two places at the same time. Like that sometimes you need him to be the one making that pass. You need him to be the one being in zone 14, making that pass or finding that space, but you'd also like him to be in the box, getting on the end of that pass too. So that's the only like the one comment I would have, that it felt like sometimes it's just like at this point the team needs it too much, because you need both the creative version of him on the ball, but you also need the aggressive version of him at attacking spaces. And as quick and as much ground as he covers, he can't literally be in two places at the same time, even if he tries.
Well, sometimes you see sequences like that from him where he is in those places in one sequence, where like he'll win the ball, he'll pass it forward and then sprint into the box and hope to get it back. And so like, yeah, there is a lot on his shoulders. Thankfully, I think if you're relying on him to do stuff deeper, we have so many great midfielders that luckily that's a bit mitigated in this situation. Here's his heat map. Pretty much everywhere. I don't think it's not
everywhere in the opposition half. Yeah.
One specific area. Yeah. Did you have any notes on our two right backs, Vazquez and Carvajal?
For Carvajal today, I still think it's a fairly solid game. The intensity is still there. So I have, and in general, like this wasn't a game where the team was tested a lot defensively. There wasn't that much of a threat to worry about. Defensively, he didn't have too many threats to worry about. He was always intense. He had several the nice thing about Carvajal when he's playing at this level of physical intensity is that he's also very useful in counter pressing situations. So you lose the ball like close to Getafe's box, and then he already has like the chip in his head of like, okay, time to hound the opposition to try to prevent them to get into a good counter attacking situation. So he had like several of these situations where like the team loses the ball and immediately he shuts down like the ball carrier and prevents a transition from Getafe. And those things are extreme. Those situations, like you don't see them as that valuable, but they're extremely valuable because you prevented what could have been a dangerous counterattack from those. So I still think it's a pretty good Carvajal performance, and he's still very intense. He's still covering a lot of ground and he's still producing a lot. So I still think maybe statistically it feels a bit, I need to check, like statistically it feels like it was maybe a bit less productive than previous games, but I still think Carvajal is performing at a really good level.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, and then with Lucas, I think Lucas still, like the thing I always appreciate about Lucas Vazquez is that even if at this point he can't, Lucas, what he's always had is just a very good end product. And you can still see that like every time he puts crosses and passes into the box.
Yeah. I mean, he had one really brilliant ball into the box. It's like this little dinked over the top ball to Fede in the right half space. And obviously his shot leads to the rebound to the Bellingham. He also had one really good defensive intervention. Carvajal, I thought, was good again. You're right. It like in terms of numbers and stats, it may not show, but I thought he was really good, solid again. There was only one thing I nitpick, and that was in the 57th minute, he gives away really poor giveaway, and Getafe have a transition attack, and eventually I think we nearly concede from that. It's the one where Kepa has to make a save. The ball falls to Darmian Suarez, and Rudiger sprints to close him down. But other than that, it was really good again. One thing I didn't enjoy was towards the end, like as the game was being closed out, this is like deep into injury time after Bellingham's already scored. We were passing it all the way back to Kepa. And I was like, I don't know if I like this. I'd much rather like get the ball to Bellingham or Rodrygo, let them hold it the corner flag, or just keep possession in their third. Because Kepa actually gave it away on one sequence in those when we were passing it back to him. Like a shocking ball out of the back. I just kind of makes me a little bit nervous. I not enjoy that part. Did you see some of the wild stuff from the celebrations when Bellingham scored?
Rudiger, of course. That's the one I.
Rudiger obviously throwing himself. I mean, not intentionally, but basically goes into the stands. He's trying to jump onto the huddle. I can't share my screen for any of that stuff because of copyright issues, but there was another. Go look at Jose if it's on the Managing Madrid Twitter account. Alaba slapping Brahim Diaz in the face. Of course, this is. Of course, in the Celta game, Alaba also punched Bellingham in the chest. Remember, Alaba celebrations are getting a little bit out of hand. I hope that he needs to channel it. Like if he's gonna go all out and samurai kick someone in the neck eventually, at least save it for a Champions League final so that we have some time for that player to rest after the samurai kick happens. But I hope that doesn't get progressively more aggressive. Obviously, it's I mean, it's great. It's great meme material, and I love the passion. He slaps Brahim Diaz.
I mean,
yeah.
These kinds of victories are just very good for team morale. So
yeah, for sure.
I honestly, I don't know, for the good of my health and my heartbeat, I'd rather we don't have too many of these. But yeah, when they do happen, it's quite nice for team spirit.
Alaba slapping Brahim Diaz reminds me to ask you if you had any notes on Brahim's cameo.
Of course, it was short.
Yeah.
Of course, some nice turns, nice dribbles, nice situations. Let's just say that in this game, it was very difficult for Brahim or for anyone to get past the Getafe guy. Like that was gonna be very hard for it to happen. And Brahim's end product, let's say that end product is not like his strongest suit. So I didn't get to see, like, I guess what I was hoping was maybe something more on the ball carrying side, but at the very least you had like some nice interventions, like in between the lines, combinations. But yeah, other than that, like we don't really get that much more from Brahim in these situations. And like I said, this was I think what's most valuable about Brahim is his 1v1. I also wanted him a bit earlier in the game because of that, but I think generally this was a game where no Real Madrid player was particularly inspired on the 1v1. And it was just like it was not going to be the team's game in that regard. And it was because no one really was doing so well 1v1 that they could consistently get advantages against Getafe.
Right. I don't have much on Tchouaméni because he's not like compared to everybody else. I just don't have as many notes on him, but I did like his performance. And I liked kind of he had a no nonsense approach to this game where it's like you get the ball, you try to find a direct vertical pass, one touch if possible. And I liked the way he played in this game. Um, and I don't know if there's a whole lot left. I mean, we didn't mention Luka Modric had a flying header, which I didn't know he could do. I think that might have been
That's
the
a
first time
first.
he's ever done
That's
that,
a
right?
first, yes.
If there's anything left that we haven't seen from Modric,
that was probably on the list, yes.
Yeah, it's one of the few things remaining. Okay. Do you have anything else that we didn't talk about?
No, I think at this point, that's pretty much it. Like, it's just, to me, the summary, it's just a game where, for example, if one of the attackers or the midfielders had like an inspiring day 1v1, this would have been a lot easier. It wasn't. Partly, yeah, maybe partly because they were lacking the inspiration, partly because Getafe is just brainwashed to like be this hard to beat 1v1. I also one of the problems I do find generally with the diamond strategy and with just having like two proper strikers is that, yes, sometimes you just don't have enough players in the box. And today, between the lack of 1v1 and the lack of more players in the box, that really made it sometimes difficult to generate shots. And that's why I think at least the strategy change in the second half and Kroos coming in was extremely useful, because then we started trying to do a different method of trying to break down this block, which was to do it more via passing and try to move the ball around quickly. And still, it was still difficult to create stuff, because I also think, just like no one was particularly inspired in the 1v1, the team was also not super inspired or precise in like in those passing combos like around the box. So it was also difficult to generate something from that. So yeah, just it was a day of the team not being particularly inspired in these situations, lacking firepower, yet they still found a solution. And quite frankly, they still created a bunch of shots. So like you were posting, like the team still made like 2.5 XG or something. So the shots were still being produced. So I still find this to be, of course, right now, as it is, this forward line has more than a few limitations. Like this, of course, would be easier. Yes, if you had more 1v1 quality. Yes, if you had someone who's even better at getting shots, or who's like just a more precise finisher. But I feel like against this kind of opponent, and with like the relatively kind of low level of individual inspiration from the players, just about as good as a performance as they could put, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we all agree that the entire squad is not ideal.
Exactly.
And now the window is closed. It is what it is, and we just kind of have to move forward and just analyze what we see game to game. It's none of the players' fault on the field. It's not really Carlo's fault either. I mean, he's responsible for maximizing the tactics now with the squad he's given. And this performance was, I think, as you know, it's definitely respectable and fine, given the opponent and given the degree of difficulty and given the injuries to Vinicius and Courtois and Militao and, Arda Güler, who sometimes is forgotten in these conversations. Obviously, we haven't seen him yet, but a promising player. So
yeah, I think like I was really like I was almost ready to go out of this just being like, okay, I thought that was a solid performance. We just got unlucky and didn't finish. And in the end, we got the finish that the required finish. But yeah, I think right now, with kind of the deficits of the forward line, these kinds of games can happen. Like I was already because I was already thinking like before Bellingham's goal, it's like, yeah, these kinds of like as it is right now with the forward line, these kinds of performances can happen where you have like a lot of shots, but you just don't quite get there. Um, and yeah, like at this point, yes, I'd like Joselu and especially Rodrygo to be more efficient with the finishing. I think we're a bit overdue on Rodrygo getting a bit. It's interesting because Rodrygo, like before 2021, into like 2021 and even first part of 2022 tended to be like a very efficient finisher. Then the last year or so of Rodrygo has been a lot less efficient with the finishing. Let's hope it gets back. He gets back to his previous efficiency, because then that would help a lot. Like that would help unlock a lot of games if he can do a step up in terms of finishing. But we'll see. What happens. But as it is right now, I think games like these, yeah, they can happen. Where just the team just doesn't quite get the finish. But all in all, I think given the opponent, given the difficulties, the team still created a lot.
And then now we have an international break. And then we come back from the international break, hopefully as healthy as possible. And that's when the schedule gets intense. So we got Real Sociedad at the Bernabeu. 3 days later, we have Union Berlin. 4 days after that, we have Atletico. 3 days after that, we have Las Palmas. And then 4 days after that, we have Girona. 2 days after that, we have Napoli. Of course, it's not exactly 2 or 3 days here and there. The schedule things will get adjusted in the schedule, like a day here and there, but nothing too significant. Basically, the point is we're going to go back to 2 games a week very soon, right after the international break. Jose, did you have any concluding thoughts on this game that you wanted to address?
No, what I said earlier was pretty much my conclusion. I think this, honestly, like going into the season, I had some doubts at the beginning, like from preseason. Well, before preseason, I had doubts. It's like, is this diamond thing really going to work? And honestly, I think we're like, the team creates a lot with it. I am kind of surprised at how well that's turned out. And there are, of course, issues. Like I said, when you have this kind of diamond setup, it seems to be more difficult to get bodies into the box, and that can sometimes be complicated, especially against deeper blocks, as we saw today. It requires a lot from the fullbacks. But all in all, I think this team is creating a lot with the current setup. Is it ideal? Of course not. Would we have like more forward signings so that we don't have to do this? But honestly, as far as kind of a stopgap goes to address kind of the lack of reinforcements in the forward line, seeing it in that context, I think this is creating a lot.
Yeah, I mean, through 4 games, we've created 8.48 XG, scored 8 goals. That's first in the league, obviously, with the caveat that Barcelona play tomorrow, and we'll probably surpass that. Also, this is crazy, funny. I don't know. Maybe it means nothing. But did you know that Atletico have a combined XG of 6.6 this season, even despite scoring 7 goals against Rayo alone? So they've scored 10 goals from an XG of 6.6. So let's see if that sustains itself. I also wanted to, Jose, I just wanted to thank everyone for submitting questions to you and I on the mailbag this week through our Discord channel. Our Discord is popping off. It's the place to be if you're a Madridista, if you want high-level discourse and you want to avoid what's happening on Twitter, the just constant shit posting that happens there. We filter it a little bit in our Discord. We have well over 1,000 members now. Please get in on that action. I will include that link in the show notes. So thanks everyone for submitting those questions to us for the mailbag that went up over on patreon.com/Managing Madrid. And also thanks for everyone for attending our live Zoom call where we did a transfer deadline day special, 2.5 hours, where we reacted to the transfer deadline window closing. And in the meantime, while we waited for news here and there, we also just took questions live on the call, and there were a ton of questions. It was, I lost track, but it was basically 2.5 hours of questions and reactions to what was happening. That if you want to join us weekly for that show, live on the call, including the mailbag, that's over on patreon.com/managing Madrid. Jose, I just want to do a quick shout out to our patrons, okay, before we log off. I know the sun is starting to set in Europe. Your room is getting darker and darker.
And I also, well, that's the thing. Like, this is a house like we just moved in, so I don't have a light up here, which is why I've been in the darkness.
Okay. All right. Well, we wanted to give a shout out to our patrons over on patreon.com/managing Madrid. Thank you so much for supporting the show and being part of this family. If you pledge $10 or more, not only do you get a guaranteed response to your questions and access to everything, you also get a specific shout out on the podcast. So shout out to Brandon Alvarez, Willie Reed, Will Sousa, Wamik Jamal, Walker Coven, Tobias Arroyo Bachar, Tahmid Kalam, Sushank Damala, Sujaiwani, Somanchu Singh, Sheikh Hatiri, Sergio Arispe, Santos Solorzano, Samuli Justin, Samar Z, Sai Mohan, Sasi Kumar, Rodrygo Balmaceda, Rishi D, Phoenix, Peter Powell, Paulo Fierro, Patrick Diafati, Oscar Barrera, Nico Laxo, Nicholas Moller, Nick Ribeiro, Nelson Mazariego, Naveen Babu Ramesh Babu, Mowgli, MJ Diego, Marin Myrtle, the next page is loading. Gotta go. It's a great problem to have. We're at, it's 2 pages. Michael Zinberg, Matthew Atkins, Martin Ridman, Magnus Lext, Logan Stahl, Leon Stavronakis, Konal Tilakar, Crystal Glass, Kevin Rivera, Jose Osorio, Jose Cruz, John Fernandez, Jeff Soa, Jason Fitz, Jacob P., Ian Marley, Howard Moore, Graham Gerard, Gary Kohut, Frederick Rantakiro, Frederick Sundros, S.A. Davisito, Eloy Enriquez, Edward Sossman, Daniel Williams, Connor McMorrow, Christian Toft, Krishna Costa, Brennan Powers, Brandon Stevens, Arnab Mukherjee, Armand Gashi, Armando L., Anthony Tharp, Andres Silvestre, Ananya Kumar, Alex Steiberg, Azaz Hussein, Adar Zalukovic, Adam Dorsey, Bella Chow, Varun, Ramtin Mahrur, Primo, Fabian Moreno, and Daniel Smith. Absolute legends. Thank you so much. Jose, thank you for your time. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Saturday and the weekend, and we'll catch you again next week on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Soon enough, yes. So thanks for all the patrons for their support, because without them, none of this would be possible. Thanks for listening, and thanks, Kiyan, for the invite. See you around.